for those. Mark, let's bring you back on screen then. And we're talking about foreign policy and a recent conference in the States.
Yes, on September 4, Mike, I covered a speech by Walter Russell Mead through the American Enterprise Institute and covered it virtually. And Walter Russell Mead is among the more noted foreign policy commentators, considered something of a guru in foreign policy circles. So I decided to cover it, much like covering CFR or Chicago Council on Global Affairs, pretty much the same ideology. The American Dream Lecture Series, Walter Russell Mead on American Foreign Policy in the Next Presidency. He had some interesting things to say. I'll do a slight rebuttal at the end. But anyway, this is some of what it was about. He kind of steered it a different way, but this is some of it. As we approach the 2024 presidential election, foreign policy concerns loom large. China continues to strengthen its military and challenge American influence around the globe. A regional war threatens to break out in the Middle East. Russia shows no sign of relenting in its invasion of Ukraine. How would a returning President Trump or ascendant President Kamala Harris confront these threats? Should we expect major foreign policy changes from either of the major parties? Obviously, they're into the duopoly. There's no other possibilities for president. And what impending crises are on the horizon? And from there, we'll just keep going. This is all my writing, and I took all these photos through the screenshot option. There's Walter Russell Mead. He's with the Hudson Institute, which is Bilderberg connected. A widely cited analyst, Walter Russell Mead is a foreign affairs professor at Bard College, formerly taught foreign policy at Yale, writes for the Wall Street Journal, also contributes to the CFR Journal Foreign Affairs, and he's a former Henry Kissinger Senior Fellow at the CFR, a former. And moving on, this is my own writing, not taken from any press release. By the way, he's also co-founder of the New America Foundation, and that includes some Bilderberg luminaries like Reid Hoffman and Anne-Marie Slaughter. A quick footnote there, but the main planks that Walter Russell Mead had to say are as follows. America, he says, has been presiding over a Pax Americana, not the so-called rules-based order. He kind of chafed at that. He doesn't really believe a rules-based order is even the right way to describe it. He believes it's been a Pax Americana all along, which you don't hear real often, meaning he feels that the world arrangement over the decades since World War II has not been based on these rules so much as it's been based on American power. And this Pax Americana, he says, is in a state of steep decline. The U.S., he went on to say, was once alone as a world power. Other nations would abstain from challenging U.S. predominance, but now America's unipolar moment is over, quote unquote. And the year 2024, he went on to say, is nothing like the good old days of 1990. Why did we fail? He's asking. Did President Clinton make trade and economic errors? Did George W. Bush make the wrong 9/11 decisions? Was Obama too weak in Syria? Was Trump too brash? He asked all these questions. Why did we fail? And going on from there, he went on to say, Team Harris seems generally oriented toward restoring and saving the Pax Americana, but may fail to act. Team Trump is not so sure that the Pax Americana was a good idea in the first place. Whoever becomes president will face the rise of China in the Indo-Pacific, and China's potential actions could seriously challenge a return to a Pax Americana. So he believes it's something virtually lost that we should return to. Mead feels that much centers on Taiwan. He says Japan and South Korea would likely cozy up to China and shy away from the U.S. if China gets into a conflict with the U.S. over the control of Taiwan, thereby weakening the U.S. position. Historically, the U.S. sought to prevent Britain, Russia, and Japan from becoming dominant powers, but now it's China to deal with, and concerns also extend to challenges from Russia, challenges from Iran, and possibly even North Korea in a sort of subordinate way or a lesser way. And some of the main quotes, the takeaways from Mr. Mead, this is one of them. Geopolitical competition is driving a wave of conflict and wars. So he is pushing the fear button a bit, but he believes it's logically grounded. He went on to say, quote, China understands the stakes and what the seizure of Taiwan would mean. And Mr. Mead went on to say that goods from that region, goods from that great region's nations, that the greater region's nations may stop flowing in the event of a U.S. conflict with China over Taiwan. Interesting stuff. And getting into a little bit more of the meat of what he had to say, and what I wrote here, Mike, is only a main slice or the main stuff. There's a lot more I could have put down, but I wanted to keep it well focused. Mr. Mead went on to say, talking about Iran in pretty bleak terms, Iran was cited as a major ongoing threat, even equal to or beyond any threat posed by China or Russia, at least at this time. Iran, as an unrelenting foe of Israel, is seeking to become a dominant regional power. Meanwhile, Israel's other enemies, such as Hezbollah, also won't relent. He called Iran the runt of the litter and says he claims it's dominating Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. The next U.S. president will likely face a nuclear Iran, he predicted. Yet the core supporters of both Harris and Trump are inward looking, which is code speak among globalists who are worried about domestic populations becoming more focused on their own countries and becoming more isolationist, one of the dreaded words among globalists. Anyway, meanwhile, both Obama regarding Crimea and George W. Bush regarding the Russian invasion of Georgia, in Mead's opinion, they both appeased and excused Russian aggressions. In the present time, Americans will grow wary of supporting Ukraine, and that would perhaps further strengthen Russia even more. Forgive the slight misspelling of strengthening there. And to summarize, Mr. Mead made some, pretty blanket statements, really engaging the audience. He said, the American unipolar moment is over, and there's no agreed upon consensus on what should replace it. And I believe from there, in the time allotted, we've got a little bit from the Hudson Institute itself. This is by Arthur Herman, toward a new Pax Americana. And what I found, and the subtitle is A New Arsenal of Democracy is Needed to Secure American Power in the 21st Century. What I found, Mike, is despite the rather insightful, although we may not agree with him totally, but the rather insightful comments of Mr. Walter Russell Mead, what I found was that a lot of it came kind of out of the boilerplate writings of the Hudson Institute itself. It wasn't really as, in terms of his presentation, it wasn't really so much his unique statements, although there were some, but again, kind of Hudson Institute boilerplate. And this shows that, this notes that the Pax Americana that has prevailed over world affairs since the end of World War II, they're claiming, is dead, not just ailing, but dead. If not actually buried, it must now be replaced. The two remaining questions are with what and how. And this is where it gets interesting, and this is where I have a slight rebuttal. The term Pax Americana, American peace, refers to the international order of the U.S. constructed after World War II and the decades of relative peace and prosperity that followed under U.S. economic and military leadership of the free world, quote unquote. That's a challengeable concept there, notwithstanding the context of a Cold War with the threat of the Soviet Union. And since 1948, that order has proved remarkably resilient and flexible in the face of multiple challenges. These included rapid changes in America's own economic fortunes and the periodic commitment of America's formidable military to large-scale wars in Asia, including Korea and Vietnam, and the Middle East, Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Afghanistan being the longest war that America was ever involved in, about 20 years, not to mention the collapse of that order's principal antagonist, the USSR, and the rise of its latest antagonist, the People's Republic of China. And my brief rebuttal on this, Mike, or observation, is that Pax Americana, meaning American peace, since about 1948, really never happened. America's been the global cop. Now it's the country on which the sun never sets in terms of its military assets and its reach. And it actually has fostered, again, the longest war on record, Afghanistan, a massive killing in Iraq starting in March of 2003 with the shock and awe bombing, unprecedented, lengthy wars with no real objectives like in Desert Storm. And really all it is war and violence on another footing. yes, there haven't been any declared wars by the US since World War II, but the undeclared wars and the global policing is simply another kind of warfare system. So to say American peace, Pax Americana, I think it's questionable as to whether that really ever happened. So it throws into question the whole premise of citing the death of this Pax Americana and what they're going to replace it with. So I'll do some follow-ups on this to see exactly what the globalists are thinking in terms of their premises and in terms of what they would replace it with. And is it true that this is really dead? I think that's what it boils down to, is the premises they use and the conclusions they make, and are they really true? But still, this gives some insight into the current thinking in foreign policy circles. So back to you, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I'm just going to throw this back at you a little bit because as far as I can see, what he's saying is what he's asking the question: what's going to replace Pax Americana? He doesn't have any answers about that, but he's busy making sure that everybody's focused on the more recent enemies like Iran and China. So, in other
Right.
words, their only answer so far is to have more of the same of this kind of undeclared war through proxies and perpetual warfare that we've got through this absolute hybrid operation we have against Russia, China, and Iran at the moment.
Exactly. Perpetual war for perpetual peace, which is a phrase coined when the Carnegie Endowment was investigated for actually fostering war. So, yeah, it's going to be more perpetual war for perpetual peace as far as we can tell, unless we hear otherwise.
Yes. Well, thanks, Mark.